There are 712 researchers aboard Meridian 7, and every one of them ran. The 8 human soldiers ran too. The 9th one made herself a drink. I have been asked, by 4 separate officials across 3 separate inquiries, to explain what Sergeant Reyes was thinking when she stayed on level 6 while a recovered bioweapon, 43 kilograms of kill anything that fears it, came through the ventilation shaft 6 meters from where she was sitting. I cannot explain it. What I can tell you is this: the creature that collapsed an entire boarding party through proximity alone, that killed 47 armed soldiers across 4 documented containment failures, that has no known non-lethal encounter record in 400 years of collected data, that creature sat down next to her and made a sound like a ship settling into dock. I was there. I documented everything I could measure. 12 entries in real time, standing at the far end of the corridor with my sidearm half drawn and my secondary nervous system doing something very small and electric in my chest. 12 entries. The part that mattered is the part one couldn't write. It starts with a lockdown. It starts with a corridor, a thermal cup, and a woman who had already lost whatever she was supposed to be afraid of losing, the kind of loss that doesn't appear in any file I'm cleared to access, redacted at a level above my rank, 3 letters long and surrounded by bureaucratic white space. It starts, as most things do, in the middle. This is my official report. It is also the most honest thing I have filed in 11 cycles of service. Make of that what you will. Report entry 7441. I wanted noted, for whatever inquiry follows, that I was following protocol. The slurry was cold. It is always cold. The dispensary on level 4 has been running at 63% capacity since the Meridian 7 retrofit, and Central Logistics has been promising a maintenance crew for 11 cycles. I have filed 9 formal complaints. I now file them the way some species groom, habitually, rhythmically, with the deep understanding that nothing will change but that the ritual itself is load-bearing. The slurry arrived at 0600 hours. I drank it. It tasted the way wet recycled air smells. I was composing complaint number 10 in my head when the station screamed. Not the lights. Not the alert tones, those came after. The station itself, the actual structure, emitted a low harmonic vibration through the corridor joints that I have since been informed is the sound of magnetic containment failing in Bay 7. I did not know that then. Then, I set down my cup and said, report entry 7441, the lights went red. The Meridian 7 is a research installation, not a military post. I hold the title subcommander because someone in Central Command decided that research stations required a security designation, and I was the only Vethrani officer in the 3rd cluster whose psychological assessment didn't include at least one flag. My job, officially, oversee 42 security personnel, manage access protocols, and ensure that the 712 researchers aboard do not accidentally kill themselves or each other with whatever they are currently dissecting in their labs. I am very good at this job. I am very good at it because nothing ever happens on Meridian 7. Base 7 was not supposed to happen on Meridian 7. The Sovereign arrived 14 cycles ago. That is what the biology team called it, informally, in the way scientists name things they both respect and fear and haven't decided which of those feelings is embarrassing. Its official designation, Specimen Batch KV9, Recovered Asset, Collapsed Reaches. 43 kilograms of bioweapon that the Reaches had been growing, then weaponizing, then catastrophically losing control of for 400 years before their civilization found the most expensive possible way to prove that some problems cannot be managed, only inherited. It moved like liquid metal. Slow when observed. Elsewhere when you looked away. Its coloration shifted depending on the electromagnetic environment around it, not camouflage in any traditional sense, but broadcast, it showed you what it was reading. The biology team told me this during the initial briefing, with the specific brightness in their eyes that researchers get when something terrifies them so much they've looped back around to delight. I filed a security concern report the same afternoon. Complaint 7341. The thing about the Sovereign, and this is in the official literature, I am not editorializing, is that it does not attack in the traditional sense. It detects what the Reaches called VEF pressure, the electromagnetic discharge that fear produces in most nervous systems. Fight or flight chemicals. The body's oldest radio signal, the one that has been broadcasting for 100 million years, the one that says I am prey and something knows it. It responds to that signal the way predators always have. Every living thing that encounters it produces the signal. That is the documented record. Every living thing. No exceptions. I filed this detail under noted and deeply concerning in Complaint 7342. When the lights went red, I already had 17 communications active. Containment failure in Bay 7 was confirmed in under 40 seconds. 3 emergency bulkheads sealed automatically rated for Class 9 biological containment, which should have been sufficient. The Sovereign was not Class 9. Subcommander Haight, my second, pulled up the tracking grid. The biosig was moving through the emergency ventilation shafts with the unhurried certainty of something that has never in its existence needed to rush. Heading upward. Toward the populated decks. It's ascending, Haight said. Report entry 7441, addendum, I said, because the log unit was already clipped to my collar and running. Biosig mobile and ascending via secondary ventilation. Initiating lockdown protocols Alpha through Sir. Through Gamma. All personnel to emergency muster, Sir. I stopped. Haight's voice carried a quality I had not heard from him before. This is a man who managed a propulsion leak containment 2 years ago. Who once talked down a research team on the verge of a jurisdictional incident involving an unlicensed sample extraction and 3 injured colleagues and the kind of departmental consequences that end careers. His voice, in both of those situations, remained the temperature of someone reading a maintenance schedule. It was not doing that now. What? I said. Human unit isn't responding to evacuation orders. There were 9 humans aboard Meridian 7. 8 of them were in designated emergency muster points within 4 minutes of the lockdown alert. I pulled the manifest myself. 8 names. 8 biosigs. 8 personnel standing precisely where protocol dictated, looking at their comms, waiting for instruction with the trained patience of soldiers who have learned that the waiting is usually the job. The 9th. Sergeant Mauro Reyes. Human. 31 years equivalent. Assigned to Meridian 7 security detail 6 weeks prior, Terran Coalition Exchange Program. Her file, extensive in the specific way that extensive files are when significant portions of them have been redacted. Combat medic rotation. 3 deployments. A commendation. A medical incident flagged at a clearance level above mine, 3 letters, a date, and white space where the details should have been. Then, reassignment to a research station in the 3rd cluster. People do not get posted to Meridian 7 because they are thriving. I had noted this when she arrived. I had noted the redacted incident. I had noted the 6-week gap between her last deployment date and her transfer date, that particular quality of administrative gap that means someone needed time before they could be trusted with something as taxing as standing watch over scientists. I had filed it under not my concern, passive monitoring. I was currently revising that classification at speed. Her biosig was on level 6. Bay 7 was level 7. The Sovereign's biosig was ascending through the shafts at approximately 2 meters per cycle. I was on level 2. Why is she on level 6? I said. Nobody answered. The station held its red light. The slurry sat cold on my desk. I looked at it. It offered nothing. It has never offered anything. I have been drinking it every morning for 11 cycles and it has never once suggested a course of action. Report entry 7441, second addendum, I muttered. I am leaving my station. Emergency lockdown corridors have a specific quality of wrong that I have attempted to document previously and have always filed under insufficient vocabulary, revisit. The lighting strips drop to red and hold there, and the color does something to peripheral vision, makes motion in your edges, makes stillness look like held breath. The ventilation runs at emergency minimum and the recycled air turns stale in under an hour, carrying a smell that lodges somewhere at the back of the sinuses and doesn't leave. And the quiet, not peaceful, not calm, but the concentrated silence of 700 people who have decided, collectively and instinctively, to be very small. I moved through level 3. Then, the maintenance junction to level 4. The standard lifts were sealed, so I took the access shaft to level 5. I was wearing my rank insignia and my sidearm, and my log unit was running, clipped to my collar, recording everything. Haidt has described this habit as a nervous tic. I prefer thorough documentation. We have agreed to disagree. The level 5 corridor was empty except for a rack of coolant canisters someone had knocked over mid-evacuation and not stopped to write. I stepped around them. Noted the time. Made a mental note to identify whose evacuation route included leaving obstacles for any security officer moving in the opposite direction. Level 6 access, secondary research wing. I opened the door. The smell arrived before anything else. Not the stale recycled air of the corridors, something sharper. The particular atmosphere of a space that 20 researchers had evacuated in under 3 minutes, leaving behind open meal packets, overturned chairs, a single boot, and the cold specific chemistry of adrenaline going stale. It smells like a decision being made very fast by everyone at once. She was at the far end of the corridor. Sergeant Reyes. Sitting on the floor. Back against the wall, one knee drawn up, head tilted back. Sidearm holstered. Both hands wrapped around a thermal cup she had, in the window between lockdown alert and this moment, made herself a beverage, and she was looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has either achieved a form of meditative clarity or has simply declined to participate in the current situation on a fundamental level. She had not noticed me. I had 17 things to say. What I said was, Report entry 7442. She looked over. Hey, Sub-Commander. The station is in emergency lockdown. Yeah. She looked back at the ceiling. I know. There is a Class 11 biological hazard ascending through the ventilation shafts toward this level. Yeah. She took a sip. I looked at her. Her pulse was visible at her throat and it was steady. Her hands were relaxed on the cup. She was not sitting the way you sit when you are ready. She was sitting the way you sit when whatever comes next has already been decided and you're simply waiting for it to arrive. Sergeant. You need to evacuate. Mum. A pause. Probably. She did not move. The ventilation panel 3 meters to her right, metal housing, standard station grade, rated for emergency pressure variance, creaked. Just once. We both looked at it. I reached for my sidearm. Reyes took another sip. The panel went still. Then, from somewhere inside the shaft, a sound. Low. Resonant. The kind of frequency that does not belong to any mechanical system and lands directly in the part of the nervous system that was old before language was, the part that does not reason, the part that simply knows. I did not draw my weapon. I froze. There is a distinction. I want it documented. Reyes set her cup on the floor with the careful precision of someone who has made a decision. Hey, she said quietly. Not to me. The panel shifted. And I stopped breathing entirely. The panel came off the wall. Not violently. It separated from its housing with the patient certainty of something that has never needed to force anything in its life, that has simply learned that pressure applied long enough makes most barriers irrelevant. It hovered, I use that word precisely, because moved is wrong and floated is wrong, and every verb in my vocabulary arrived at the moment and found itself inadequate for a breath in the air beside the shaft opening, then set itself on the floor. I want that noted. It set the panel down. Then, the sovereign came through. I had read the biology team's documentation. All of it. After KV-9 arrived, I requested the full research file, my security clearance entitled me to it, and I read it cover to cover, and I read the encounter logs from the Reach's containment failures, and I read the 3 separate military research assessments from the Coalition archives, and then, I filed complaints 7,340 through 7,344 in a single afternoon. I knew the dimensions. The weight classifications. The coloration shift mechanism. The fear pheromone detection parameters. I had read 47 armed soldiers and understood it as a number. A data point in a prepared threat assessment. Knowledge is not preparation. The Sovereign came through the shaft, opening the way weather systems move, not from a point of origin but from everywhere at once, the way a pressure front doesn't arrive so much as make itself suddenly apparent. It filled the corridor in a way that had nothing to do with its actual dimensions. It filled it the way significance fills a room. It was 43 kilograms and it occupied the space of something far older and far less interested in being categorized. Its coloration, a deep, shifting gray. The specific shade of nothing. Of the space between things. Of the kind of dark that isn't dramatic, just absent, just the color that things go when all the other colors have decided to leave. It stopped. Tilted whatever served as its head. 3 meters from Reyes. I had my sidearm half drawn and then I stopped drawing it because I am not, whatever my personnel file may suggest about my formal complaints to actions ratio, a fool. Every biology report I had read confirmed it. Discharging a weapon in proximity to an active KV-9 subject registers as threat behavior. Threat behavior triggers what the documentation calls rapid target acquisition, which is a phrase that performs considerable bureaucratic labor in the service of not saying what the encounter logs describe in detail immediately afterward. I was also, I should note, not breathing. My secondary nervous system, the Vethrani backup flight loop, the one that operates below conscious input, had bypassed my primary control and was doing something in my thoracic cavity that I can only describe as small and electric and continuous, like a current being run through something that does not want to be conducting it. The Sovereign's detection mechanism reads that signal. It reads the electromagnetic discharge of every threat chemical the body produces. It has been reading that signal in every living thing it has ever encountered for 400 documented years. I was broadcasting it in every available register. Reyes was not. She hadn't moved from her position against the wall. Knees still up. Thermal cup still beside her. She was looking at the Sovereign the way she had been looking at the ceiling, not blank, not meditative, but with a quality of attention that I would spend days trying to name and eventually file under already arrived. Like she had been waiting, and the thing she'd been waiting for had come, and she was simply present for it. The Sovereign's coloration shifted. Gray bled into something paler. Silver. The biology team had documented that silver register coloration was associated with reduced threat assessment, that the creature's color shift was not camouflage but communication, broadcast in the opposite direction of concealment. It was showing her something. I do not know what. You're hungry, Reyes said. Not a question. The Sovereign tilted its head the other direction. I know. Me too. She glanced at the thermal cup. Looked back. Station food is bad enough without the alarms. I wanted noted in this report that I was, in that moment, experiencing something I can only describe as 2 realities running simultaneously in full fidelity. In one, everything was occurring exactly as documented. The creature was loose. The lockdown was active. The threat parameters were met. In the other, none of the documentation had prepared me for the tone of that exchange, the quality of casualness in her voice, the way she spoke to it not as a handler to a specimen but as a person to another person who happened to be sitting in a corridor and also happened to be 43 kilograms of the deadliest recovered organism in the 3rd Cluster's research archive. The gap between those 2 realities had no protocol. The Sovereign took 1 step forward. I stopped having thoughts. It stopped. Reyes extended her hand. Not toward it, not beckoning, not the deliberate outstretched motion of a handler offering an incentive. She extended it the way you extend a hand into open space, slowly, palm up, fingers loose. The way you would if you weren't asking for anything. If you were simply making yourself available for whatever decision the universe was going to arrive at without your input. She did not look afraid. I have tried, since this incident, to accurately describe her expression for this report. I have tried 11 times. The nearest I can get is this: she looked like someone who had already lost the thing they were most afraid of losing and had found that the space afterward was quieter than expected. Not peace. Not resignation. Not even acceptance. Just after. The place that comes after the worst thing. The sovereign moved. It crossed the 3 meters between them in a motion I could not follow, not fast, not invisible, simply complete, the way a sentence is complete when the last word arrives. It was there, and then it was beside her, and I registered this not visually but through the change in air pressure and the shift in the corridor's electromagnetic signature, something the biology team had never described, never included in any documentation, but which is real in the way that few things are real. It was a weight in the air, a change in the quality of the space, like something very large and very old had decided to sit down. I did not breathe. Reyes turned her head. The sovereign was at her shoulder. Beside her. Angled toward her, its massive body folded into a stillness that I would, in any other creature, call calm, but that in this context I had no name for, because the documentation used calm as a relative absence of threat display, and what I was seeing was something more active than absence. It was a presence. A deliberate lowering. Its coloration was silver. Almost white. The biology team had no notation for white. Reyes looked at it. Then, she lifted her hand and set it on the sovereign. Not petting. That is the word that was used, later, in the debrief, and it is technically accurate and completely wrong. It was not the brisk affectionate gesture of a creature being handled. It was slower than that. It was the motion of someone putting their hand on the shoulder of another person they've found in a dark room, not comfort, not reassurance, not anything with an agenda behind it. Just, I'm here. I know you're here. The sovereign did not move. Its coloration held white. I want to be precise about what followed, because I have reviewed the log recording 6 times. Nothing happened. That is precisely what happened. The most dangerous recovered organism in 3 clusters worth of research archives sat beside a human soldier on the floor of level 6, in the red light of an emergency lockdown, and was still. No attack. No threat display. No rapid target acquisition. The 47 soldiers in the encounter logs, the boarding party, the 4 containment failures, all of that was a different story being told by a different creature. Then, it made a sound. Low. Resonant. Not the sound from the shaft, not that one, not the one that had reached into the oldest part of my nervous system and pulled. Different. Slower. A sound like something settling. A sound like a structure that has been under load finally, being allowed to stand at rest. The biology team, when I played it for them afterward, listened to it 3 times without speaking. Dr. Veith said, "We've never recorded that vocalization." I asked what it meant. She said she didn't know. I was still standing at the far end of the corridor. My sidearm was in my hand. I don't remember completing the draw, it was simply there, the way instinct manifests as physical fact before you've caught up with the decision. The red light made the floor look like the inside of something that had already made up its mind about how this would end. Reyes looked at me over the sovereign's shoulder. It is a considerable liberty with its anatomy to use the word shoulder. I am using it anyway. You can put that down, she said. I looked at the weapon. I looked at the creature with the 47 soldier encounter record and the 4 containment failures and the 3 military assessments, all concluding, in slightly different administrative languages, that non-containable under standard engagement protocols was the kindest available description. Sitting. Leaning, slightly, I need to note this, it was leaning against her arm. Report entry 7443, I said, because I did not know what else to do. Because the log was running and that is what I do when the situation exceeds the available vocabulary. I put a timestamp on it and keep going. The corner of Reyes's mouth moved. Crooked. A small expression with deep roots, the kind of humor that has learned to live in dry ground, that has stopped needing anything from the situation in order to find it faintly absurd. You do that a lot, she said. It is a documentation habit. Sure. She looked back at the sovereign. Its white register coloration hadn't shifted. Her hand was still on it. Yeah, okay. Sure. The creature's color held. Just white. Just still. I did not lower my weapon. I also did not fire it. I stood in the red light with my sidearm half raised and my log running and watched a human soldier sit on the floor of a locked-down research station with the most lethal organism in the third cluster's cataloged archive leaning against her shoulder. I watched it and I could not file it. Could not close the entry. Could not locate the procedural framework into which this moment belonged. The ventilation system ran its emergency minimum hum. Somewhere 3 levels up, Haight was coordinating the containment response and, wondering, I assumed, where his sub-commander had gone. I did not call him. I did not move. I watched, because it was the only thing available to me, and because there are moments when watching is the most honest response to a universe that has decided to be larger than your documentation of it. This was one of those moments. And the Sovereign breathed. Slow. Even. At rest. The lockdown lasted 6 more hours. I know because I was present for all of them, standing at the far end of the level 6 corridor with my log running and my sidearm eventually, quietly, holstered. My supervisor found this notable in the follow-up debrief. Sub-commanders, she explained, with the patience of someone who has explained things to sub-commanders many times before, are not expected to remain at active biological hazard sites. They coordinate from safety. They let the containment teams work. I told her I had been monitoring the situation. She looked at the 12 log entries I had filed between the moment the Sovereign emerged from the shaft and the moment it went back in. Looked at them for a while. 12 entries, she said. I document thoroughly. She did not respond to this. The silence had the quality of a response. What happened in those 6 hours? Reyes sat on the floor. The Sovereign sat beside her. I stood at the far end of the corridor and held the specific posture of a security officer conducting official observation, which is a posture I have spent 11 cycles perfecting and which was doing, in that particular corridor, rather a lot of work. At the 40-minute mark I realized I was still holding my weapon. I holstered it. At the 90-minute mark, Reyes finished her thermal cup and set it aside, and the Sovereign made the slow sound again, the settling sound, and she made a small sound back. Not mimicking. Not performing. The kind of acknowledgement you make when someone says something you didn't need them to say out loud but are glad they said anyway. The two of them sat in the red-lit corridor with the ease of people who have known each other across some distance that isn't measured in time. At the 2-hour mark I said, quietly, because the log was still running, report entry 7449. The subject appears, I stopped. Appears what? Calm. Comfortable. At ease. These were all accurate and all insufficient. These were words that belonged to a different situation, a situation where the thing being described was a specimen behaving in an expected range. Stable, I finished. Both subjects. Reyes heard both. She glanced back over the Sovereign's shoulder-adjacent region. The corner of her mouth moved. You doing okay over there? She asked. I am conducting official observation. Right. She looked back at the creature. You've got your little recorder going. My log unit is standard issue documentation equipment. Aha. The crooked expression again. Deeper this time, the version that has decided the situation is specific enough to be funny. And you've been standing in the same spot for 2 hours. I have been monitoring. Yeah. The Sovereign's coloration had stopped cycling entirely. Just white. Just still. An hour before the Sovereign returned to the shaft system, I walked the length of the corridor and sat against the wall. 3 meters from Reyes. I did not examine why. The Sovereign tracked my approach with the full attention of something that has never in its existence needed to hurry a single assessment. Its color ran briefly through gray, just once, just a flicker, the way a room changes quality when a door opens and closes, then steadied back to silver. It did not move. Hey, Reyes said. Hey, I said. This is not a standard greeting in my vocabulary. It emerged without consulting my professional register. The log caught it. I have not deleted it. We did not speak for a while. The emergency ventilation kept its reduced hum. The red light made everything look like a preliminary draft, like the situation hadn't quite been finalized yet, like there was still a version of it where everything unfolded differently. "How long have you been eating that slurry?" she said. I looked at her. "You know about the slurry. I walk past your office every morning shift." A pause. "It smells bad. The dispensary has been operating at 63% capacity since 11 cycles. You told Hate. Hate told the whole shift." She glanced at me sideways, the expression dry, the roots of it old. "You could eat in the commons." "I eat in my office because I stopped." Tried to locate the reason, which I had always assumed was obvious and, which now, examined directly, revealed itself to be less obvious than assumed. "That is not relevant to the current situation." "Probably not." She looked at the sovereign, which was watching us both with the patient focus of something that has encountered many conversations in its existence and found most of them interesting. "But, it's interesting." I looked at the sovereign too. Up close, and I was, now, close in a way that no security protocol anywhere in my training had prepared me for. It was larger than the documentation had communicated. The way mountains are larger than maps. "Why didn't you evacuate?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. The thermal cup turned once in her hands. "I was going to," she said. And then, the alarm hit and I was all ready. She stopped. Looked at the empty cup. "I was tired," she said. And running seemed like a lot. It was not the full answer. "I have filed 941 formal complaints in 11 cycles of service and that has sharpened, if nothing else, the sense for when an answer is performing completion without achieving it." I did not ask again. The sovereign made its settling sound. We sat in it. It left 40 minutes later. Stood unfolded itself from its stillness with the same patient geometry as everything else it had done, without hurry, without drama, without any acknowledgement that this was remarkable. Moved to the ventilation panel. The panel separated from its housing. The creature regarded Reyes for a moment. She nodded. Once. It went into the shaft. The panel replaced itself with the precise care of something that knows where things belong. And then, it was just level 6, just the corridor, just the red light and the hum, just a toppled coolant rack 3 meters from the door and an empty thermal cup on the floor and 2 security personnel against the wall and the particular quiet that follows something large deciding to leave. I sat in it for a moment. Then, I said, "Report entry 7455. Reyes laughed. A real one is short, surprised by itself, the kind that escapes before the person has decided to let it out. She looked at the ceiling. Looked back at the ventilation panel. Shook her head slowly with the expression of someone who has stopped expecting the day to make sense and has found this, counterintuitively, restful. "You're something else," she said. "I am documenting the conclusion of the incident." "Yeah." She got to her feet. Retrieved the thermal cup. Looked at the panel where the sovereign had gone for a moment, not long, just a moment, the way you look at a door after someone has walked through it. "Yeah, okay." The full incident report took 22 hours to file. 46 pages. The most comprehensive single document I have produced in 11 cycles of service. I documented the containment failure, the evacuation compliance by species, the sovereign's egress and return routes, the observed behaviors of KV-9 in proximity to human subject Reyes, M, and my personal recommendations for updated containment and tracking protocols. I included all 12 log entries verbatim. The biology team requested access to the recordings. I provided them. Dr. Veith listened to the full 6 hours. She listened to the settling vocalization 3 additional times, isolated, with the expression of someone in the process of replacing a certainty with a question they don't yet have the vocabulary for. Her secondary researcher left the room at some point and came back with both of their cups refilled, and they sat together listening to the waveform like two people who have realized, simultaneously, that their field has just gotten larger. "It's a settling sound," Dr. Veith said eventually. "A what?" "Social species make it." It's a post-threat vocalization when the fight or flight assessment drops below a functional threshold. She was still looking at the waveform. When an individual has been assessed as applause. The word arrived with wait. Safe. I looked at the waveform. Low. Slow. The rhythm of something genuinely at rest. We've never recorded it from a KV-9 subject, she said. Not once. 400 years of documented encounters. Every armed response, every containment attempt, every boarding action in the Reach's records. Not once. I looked at the waveform for a while. What does it mean? I said. Not in terms of the biology. I knew she understood that. She looked at it too. I think it means she was the first thing it ever encountered that it wasn't afraid of. I found Reyes the following cycle in the station commons. She was eating actual food, commons food, not the level 2 dispensary output, and looking out the viewport at the cluster's scatter of distant light. The way people look at large things when they're thinking about something that isn't the large thing. I set my slurry down across from her. She looked at it. Then, at me. The crooked expression. Old roots, dry ground. You brought it here, she said. I always bring it here. A pause. I just usually eat in my office. She looked at the slurry. It really does smell terrible. Yes. You should eat real food. The commons food is, I stopped. Yes. She looked back at the viewport. The cluster's light. The particular cold scatter of things very far away. The question I hadn't asked on level 6 was still sitting between us. It had followed me through 22 hours of incident reporting and, through the biology team debrief and, through whatever constitutes sleep when you have spent 6 hours standing in a red-lit corridor with the most lethal documented organism in 3 clusters and, have come away from it with more questions than you arrived with. You said you were afraid, I said. Carefully. Not an accusation. Not even a challenge. Just, I am still documenting. I am always still documenting. She turned her cup in her hands. Once. Twice. I was, she said. But, just. She stopped. It wasn't the scariest thing in that corridor. She looked at me then, with something in her expression that was not an invitation to ask what was. It was the look of someone who has already decided that particular entry is closed, not sealed, not defended, just not for today, not for this conversation, not for the file she knows I am mentally composing as we speak. I did not ask. I looked at the viewport. The clusters scatter. The cold precise light of things that are very far away and have been burning for longer than any of us have been keeping records. Report entry 7461, I said quietly. The sound that came from her was half a breath. Reluctant. The kind of almost laugh that a person releases when they've decided the situation has earned it. You're documenting this. I document everything. Yeah. She looked back at the light. I know. The sovereign was never recovered. I want that in the report. Clearly. Without qualification. The ventilation trace went cold within 12 hours of the lockdown lift. Biosig tracking returned nothing. The biology team's modified detection protocols updated specifically in response to this incident, in consultation with security, which is to say in consultation with me, which is to say I finally, 1-1, have turned up nothing in 30 cycles of active monitoring. It is somewhere. In the station's infrastructure, or it is not. In the docking superstructure, or further. The advisories have been filed with the appropriate authorities. The containment protocols have been updated. The procedures have been revised. We have continued to not find it. I check the tracking grid every shift now. Haidt has noticed. He checks it too. Neither of us has mentioned this to the other. It is one of those arrangements that works precisely because it isn't discussed. The dispensary reached 71% capacity 3 cycles ago. The slurry is marginally warmer. I have filed no further complaints about it. Hate noticed that too. Reyes ate in the Commons this morning. I ate in the Commons this morning. We discussed the dispensary upgrade, a scheduling conflict in the delta rotation, and whether the level 3 coolant rack represented a recurring liability or simply an inevitability. Normal things. The specific texture of normal that sits in a station where an ancient recovered bioweapon has decided, for reasons that 46 pages of official documentation cannot adequately explain, that one person among 700 is not a threat. I have been returning to that phrase. Not a threat. Not fearless. Not trained for it. Not special in any of the ways that the documentation uses the word special. Just past the thing that reads as danger to something old enough to know the difference. I don't know what that thing was. I have the redacted file. I have the gap between deployment dates. I have it wasn't the scariest thing in that corridor and, nothing else, no footnote, no elaboration, dropped and, left and, trusted to sit. It sits. That is the entry I cannot close. 7461, ongoing.